So what they do to solve the ex nihilo problem is they load all ultimate particles of matter with their own incipient consciousness.
But let me throw something in. I think that's going to challenge Nathan a little bit and also challenge you a little bit, JP, to kind of clarify some things. I think artificial intelligence is a really interesting thought experiment. So, Nathan, you say that we kind of have a clear idea of how, the mind is produced by the brain. And, the fact of the matter is we're really far away from any artificial intelligence that has a mind. And so if I have a hard time, especially because, I work with, cognition and computers. That's what I do in a great deal of my research. It's possible. I can grant that it's possible that we'll be able to make artificial intelligence that has a mind, but we're not anywhere near that. And it's not even like anyone knows how to do it or even how to know if we succeeded. That's some pretty big gaps to bridge. And so I think that challenges you. And I kind of hear your thoughts on that. But then for JP, I think, it seems like your account can't really preclude the idea that artificial intelligence could eventually have a mind. I kind of put myself more in the agnostic, but most substance dualists that I know would say that humans could never create a machine that actually had a genuine mind. And I think there's two things that unsettle that. One is how would you really know that? And let's say there is something that God has to endow upon it for it to have a mind. How do you know that God wouldn't do that to a machine that humans created one day in the future? So, I think that, so how do you know if artificial intelligence can have a mind in the future? So I think that's kind of an unsettling thought experiment, I think, for both of you to kind of work through. Do you think artificial intelligence can have a mind? What do you both think about that? You go ahead, JP, you can go first.
Well, I know I can't. And there is an in-principle problem.
Okay.
And you said, well, how would we know? Well, here's how we know. It is a fundamental principle of reality that you can't get something out of pure nothing.
But it's not pure nothing.
No, please stay with me, okay? All right. If your creation story is in the beginning were the particles, or wavicles, or strings, or whatever you want to call them. There's a Big Bang, and you have plasma and matter, as it is described by our best ideal chemistry and physics, just setting aside what in the world quantum physics is saying, because I think there are 14 different interpretations of the ontology of quantum physics. But if we grant that the creation story for a well thought out atheist, as almost,
but we're not talking about atheists. I'm a Christian. Right?
Stay with me. A well thought out atheist who has clearly realized his responsibility to have a creation story. Then what is going to happen, as atheist and naturalist Colin McGinn has pointed out, is that story will be combinatorial. It will be a story that begins with the Big Bang and explains how different tiny, whatever they are, let's just call them particles, arranged to form larger and larger clumps of particles according to the laws of nature. And so what that will give you will be larger and larger, more complicated clusters of particles, all the way from galaxies to a cell. Now, the difficulty is that if you do that, you cannot explain the emergence of consciousness, because that would be to get something, sensations, thoughts, beliefs, desires, from entities that don't have the potentiality for that. They're brute matter. So that is why more and more atheists that are naturalists are abandoning a materialist view of the world in favor of panpsychism of some form or other. Leading figures are David Skirbina and David Chalmers. The reason they've done that is they acknowledge that if you start with matter, you can't get consciousness coming into existence, because just rearranging matter according to natural law, it's going to give you rearranged matter. There's no way that you can get something conscious from that. So what they do to solve the ex nihilo problem is they load all ultimate particles of matter with their own incipient consciousness.
But look, but JP, we got to slow you down here, because you're arguing against people that aren't even here. Like, we're not actually taking a reductive account. I mean, at least I'm not taking a reductive account. I'm not an atheist either.
Well,
So
I'm explaining to you why you can't get artificial intelligence.
Well,
and how do I know that? You said, how do you know that?
But then you went to atheism. So I'm saying, from a Christian point of view, even if you want to go from there, how do you know?
Here's how we know that. You can't get consciousness by rearranging matter. So you can take machine parts that are, if you'll grant me, that our best description of them is probably what ideal physics and chemistry and maybe neuroscience says about them. But you're going to search in vain in any of those hard science textbooks to see anybody ascribing to matter sensations, thoughts, beliefs, desires, and so on. And so if you start with matter and rearrange them, Josh, what you're going to end up with is a syntactic engine, not a semantic engine. You'll end up with something that can run an algorithm, but it doesn't have any sentient awareness of anything. It can't think. There's no what it's like to be a computer. There is no what it is like to feel pain or to think that 2 and 2 is 4. What they are calculation machines, not conscious objects. Now, how could God just endow one with consciousness? No. And here's why. Because whenever a complex object, like say a car, by that I mean an object composed of a lot of parts, whenever you have a complex object that performs a function, it does that by distributing different functions to different members of the object, and the function of the whole is the result of the function of all of its distributed parts. Think of a car. Its ultimate function is to move down the road, and that is the result of the pistons and the spark plugs and so on, each doing its role. Now, if I were a brain, then, and we've also learned from neuroscience that this is even worse than the thought experiment. If I were a brain, the actions of my brain would be the result of actions of different regions and subregions and neurons that are wired together behaving in different ways to accomplish different functions. If that's true, then there is no explanation for the unity of my consciousness. Because if I look at a football game, there is a what it is like to see the field as a whole. But if my brain were what contained my sensations of sight, then one region of the brain would have what it's like to see the 1 yard line. Another part of the brain would have what it's like to see the 2 yard line. Another would, and there would be nothing I would be like a crowd of 80,000 people, each looking and having his neck strapped to look at only 1 square yard of the field. Material objects, because they're made out of complexes of parts, are simply not the kinds of things that are capable of explaining the unity of consciousness.